Welcome to the 24 Hours of PASS Evolution of the Data Platform. We're excited you could join us today for the Microsoft SQL Server 2016 Program Manager panel. This 24 Hours of PASS event consists of 24 consecutive live webcasts delivered by expert speakers from the PASS community. The sessions will be recorded and posted online after the event. To access any on-demand sessions, please visit www.24hoursofpass.com for all session links. My name is Tom Norman, and I am the Virtualization Virtual Chapter Leader for PASS. So if you like this particular session or any virtual sessions, then come on over and join us and watch our sessions. There are so many others that you can also join to, PowerShell, Azure, and etc. So check out the PASS website for other virtual chapters. I have a few introductory slides before I hand over the reins to the panel. If you require technical assistance, please type your question into the question pane located on the right side of your screen and someone will assist you. This question pane is also where you may ask questions throughout the presentation, and since this is a Q&A, go ahead and start typing your questions and we'll get them to the panel. Feel free to enter your questions at any time, and once we get to the Q&A session, portion of the session, I'll read your questions aloud to the speaker. You are able to zoom in on the presentation content by using the zoom button located at the top of the presentation window. Please note that there will be a short evaluation at the end of the session. Your feedback is important to us, so please take a moment and complete it. It will appear in your web browser. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Amazon Web Services, Hortonworks, Redgate, and Microsoft, empowering users with new insights through familiar tools while balancing the need for IT to monitor and manage user-created content, deliver access to all data types across structured and unstructured sources. In addition, I'd also like to thank the supporting sponsors for this event, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and SQL Server Century and SanDisk. The stage of the 24 Hours PASS would not be possible without their generous support, and they are the reason this event is available free of charge. Make sure you explore everything that PASS has to offer for data professionals. You can join local user groups around the world, special interest groups, find free online resources through our Learning Center, and read up on the latest community news in the Connector newsletter. And now I'd like to introduce our panel. We have Casey, Joes, Sunil, Louis, Joe, Umachandar, Jack, Sahaj, Tommy, and Kevin, and I apologize to any one of them that if I misspelled their names. So we do have one question that came in from Twitter, but go ahead and put them into the question window and we will get them to them. So the first question is 1 million rows or increment of 1 million rows the optimal number to partition a billion row CCI table? Panel?
Yeah, hi, this is Sunil. I can take that question. So the way we decided to use million row size for, you can call it partition, it is actually a row group, that's what we call. So one factor was that what is the minimum set of rows we need to get good compression, and we found that the million row offers a pretty optimal compression. So that is one point. The second point is when you have large table, like say billions of rows, in many cases we are able to eliminate these row groups, because if you process all billion rows in the query, a query will of course be slower versus if you can eliminate bunch of rows. So row group is also a unit of elimination of the data. So in our testing we found the million row is good, and we have had many workloads running with column store with even 250 billion rows, and they're performing well with the size. So yes, it is 1 million rows regardless of the size of the table. Thank you.
All right, our next question.
Sorry, may I interrupt? It's just here. Just to add to Sunil, to clarify that when Sunil was talking about row groups, that is like the internal concept that we have for organizing column store indexes. So that's not the user partitioning feature. So user partitions, definitely 1,000,000 rows is far too small for any single partition. And so you would partition for larger ranges of rows.
Okay, any other panelists want to chime in on that? If not, our next question is, how does Polybase work? Will we be able to create both structured NoSQL and SQL database in SQL Server 2016?
I can take this one. So this is Casey here. So how Polybase works in the SQL Server 2016 is that you can write standard T-SQL statements after you've created an external data source, external file format, and an external table within SQL Server. You can connect to Hadoop or Azure Blob Storage and query remote data there. So the idea of creating a NoSQL database within SQL Server 2016 isn't quite correct, but you can connect SQL Server to HDFS in order to just query the remote data in a streaming method. Or in the case of Hadoop clusters, you can actually push down computation to the cluster. So in that case, you'd write a T-SQL statement. Polybase would convert the T-SQL statement into a MapReduce job, and then submit that MapReduce job to the Hadoop cluster for computation. And then the results from that computation are streamed back to the user on the SQL Server side.
All right. Any other panelists like to answer the question, or are we good?
I think Casey should probably repeat the answer because the first part of the answer was not heard by us. We don't know if it's just here or...
Okay. So to answer the question again, so Polybase works by connecting SQL Server to HDFS or Azure Blob Storage. And so once that connection is created, you can write T-SQL statements that references data stored within HDFS in either Azure Blob Storage or a Hadoop cluster. So you're not really creating NoSQL databases within SQL Server 2016. You're just referencing data stored in HDFS. You're querying it using T-SQL.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Next question we have, are there any plans to invest any more development resources to the BPE feature in future releases?
I'll take that. This is Kevin. We are looking at the BPE feature. Right now we're in the middle of a planning stage, so nothing is set in concrete yet, but we're definitely looking at some ways to extend the utility of BPE, in other words, using it in more and more different scenarios.
Kevin, could you repeat for the audience what BPE is?
So that's buffer pool extension, so it's a way to store clean data in a fast access, so like typically an SSD, rather than persist it out into the regular database pages. So it's clean pages. We don't have to worry about losing data if the SSD goes away, but that's what it is. It's for accelerating queries where we expect to need those pages again soon.
Okay. The next question we have is, and each part of the team can answer this, what is your favorite new feature in SQL Server 2016?
My favorite feature is drop if exists.
Drop it. There we go. There we go.
I like string splits.
String splits? Okay. And why?
Splitting strings has been like a big pain point for many customers. There have been so many very ugly workarounds that are very fragile, so we're happy that we can delight their customers with that feature. Now, of course, this is more of a kind of, from our point of view, kind of a smaller delighter, which we think does have a big impact, but it is not one of the kind of bigger highlight features, obviously, of the release. I personally really like temporal tables. I think they can be used really broadly in many different workloads. I've talked with many customers who have already built some kind of homegrown solution for maintaining temporal data. And with temporal table support in SQL Server, that will make applications really far these types of applications really far easier to architect and to put together.
This is Kevin. I'm partial to a lot of the changes we put into the always-on availability groups. We intentionally focused on picking up lingering issues that have been annoying people for a long time and cleaning them up, making a much smoother experience. That and performance. We did a lot of work to make the log transport much, much faster, and that's opened up a whole lot of interesting scenarios.
This is Sunil. If I have to vote one feature that I think is my favorite is the query store. The query store technology was introduced in 2016, and it allows you to quickly find the query performance problem that you have in your workload. And the way I think about query store is like a black box for an aeroplane. So it is a black box for SQL Server. And when you have any query performance issues, you can look at the query store and figure out how it was running yesterday, what changed, and things like that. So I think it is it's helping pretty much all our customers. So my favorite.
All right, we'll go on and maybe come back to let some other panelists actually answer that question. And I wish I would have had temporal tables, guys, about 10 years ago. So I've done the same thing, the homegrown stuff. So, all right, any changes to SQL Server Distributed Replay Utility Module in SQL Server 2016 or later versions?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts about whether SQL Server 2016 will officially support Storage Spaces Direct or S2D?
We're working on that one right now. We're in the process of trying to get everything set up and tested to formally do the support. I've manually set up configurations, and it seems to work. That's not the bar that we have for formal support. We have to integrate it into our automated test, and the setup, frankly, is a big chore. So it's a matter of when that will get done. But the intention is to support that.
Okay. When do you plan to add Power Query feature, i.e. pulling data from Salesforce report to SSRS or SSIS?
Yeah, I don't think we have any SSRS or SSIS folks here in the panel. We're all database engine.
All database engine guys, okay. Are there any risks or downsides to be aware of in upgrading from 2012 to 2016?
I can take that one. So I would definitely really recommend to upgrade to 2016. There are so many improvements, even a lot of performance improvements that you just get out of the box without making any configuration changes or any application changes. You should search the web for SQL Server 2016. It just runs faster. This is a blog series that CSS is doing, and they have by now about 30 blogs describing different features which just make a workload run faster without making any changes. So just upgrade to 2016 and we'll all run faster. Of course, there are always some potentially some issues. So we did make some changes in the query optimizer and especially in the cardinality estimation model. We made these changes primarily in 2014 and continue to improve in 2016. With that, we see most queries, by far most queries, are running a lot faster because you get better query plans. But there are always some edge cases which cause regressions. Now we do have ways to mitigate that. So first off, the new CE is only used under compat level 120 and 130. The second is we have actually a DB scoped configuration setting to use Alt CE even under compat level 130. So you can tell your database to use Alt CE even under compat level 130. And third, there is the query store that Sunil was talking about. So in fact, what you can do with the query store is so you upgrade to 2016, use your old combat level, enable query store, and then upgrade the combat level to 130, and then you can monitor in query store whether there are any queries that have plan regressions, and if so, you can even force the old plan. So that's a way to mitigate any risk there.
And let me add one more point to what Yos was pointing out. So starting with 2016, we have this cloud-first model. What it means is that all the features that are part of 2016 are already running in production in our SQLDB Azure database in the cloud. So which means that you have the features in 2016 that have been vetted by multiple production workloads, and in some cases we found issues which we fix in the product. So right off the gate, 2016 is because of the exposure to a lot of production workloads through the cloud platform, it is at a much higher quality bar. So I think you should not be concerned about that. A lot of people think about, hey, let me wait for SP1. I'm saying 2016 quality is a pretty high quality, so that should not be a concern of not upgrading to 2016.
Just to add to what Sunil was saying, as during the development of 2016, you saw monthly CTPs coming from us. Now, before we shipped the monthly CTP of 2016, we already deployed the bits that we were shipping to you. We deployed those in our data centers in cloud to run the Azure SQL database service. So before any CTP went out of the door, the bits were already used to run our own mission-critical workload. So that, and on top of that, we have additional stabilization for RGM. So this should give you a lot of confidence in the quality of the SQL 2016 bits.
Okay, all right. Moving forward, any plans on making distributed database to part of the availability groups, the distribution database in replication?
That's on the list. It didn't make the cut in SQL 2016, but it's definitely being considered for futures.
Okay. Are there any new features on Always On to support for better fixing and troubleshooting when a replica disconnects, and is there no way to get it back in sync?
Lewis, you want to take this one? Talk about seeding?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did is we introduced direct seeding between the primary and the secondary. So in the past, the only way to start a secondary replica was to take a full backup and restore it, and a couple of log backups and get it up to sync with the primary. We have introduced now direct seeding, and that's basically the primary directly streaming the log to the secondary. And as Kevin mentioned, we have dramatically improved the performance of the log synchronization between primary and secondary. And what that means is if you need to seed a new secondary, basically you can use direct seeding, and then it's going to make use of all the improvements that we did in the log synchronization. It's around 10 times faster than what it used to be.
Okay. Is it possible to set up SQL Server 2016 instance just to use the query store feature for other instances on our environment?
I can answer. I mean, you can use it, but then that means you'll have to replay the workload from the other instances on the SQL Server 2016, right? Because this is based on like query execution, so that means you have to run the commands for the query distore to essentially capture the statements and the stats, right? So yeah.
So, but the query data store, to be clear, can't store query results or performance results of different plans from other instances. It's local to the instance that the query store is on.
Okay. Can you talk about what might be happening regarding DAX mode support for storage class memory in SQL Server 2016 on Windows Server 2016?
So one of the areas we're exploring is using DAX mode, which is using non-volatile memory, so memory that operates at DRAM speeds but is persistent, to store the tail of the log, so the log buffer. That makes it so that we don't ever have to wait for the I/O to complete on a commit. We can just keep going as soon as it's in the log buffer because that itself is persistent. That's not, it's under trace flag in 2016. We are looking to finish out the surface area to properly surface that and complete the testing in our cycles going forward.
All right. When will we have VMs in Azure with SQL Server 2016 that's not the release candidate, the full version?
So we release this on the same day when we release the new version of SQL. So right now the latest one that we carry is RC3. So on the launch date, the moment that we release SQL 16 RTM, we're going to have the image available.
Okay, so that's June 1st then?
That's correct. And the other thing to mention is we're going to have all the editions of SQL Server available as images in virtual machines. So we have Enterprise, Standard, and Developer available there.
Okay, cool. When I restore a stretched database to another server B, does restored database point to the same stretched data stored in your cloud as the original database? So if you move stretched database to another server, does it still point to the same cloud server?
Hey Tom, I can take this. So that's up to you. By default, the cloud database can only have one primary on-prem. So when you issue restore, if you are replacing the existing one or moving it to a new server, it really depends on the next step, which is when you reauthorize. So as part of the reauthorize, you specify either with copy equals to true or false. If it's true, then that newly restored database will point to a copy of the database in Azure. So essentially it will trigger a copy process in Azure, so do a full copy of the database, and once that's done, we'll reconcile, and now you have a completely new pair. If you say with copy equals false, then it will point to the original one. So there's no copy, no restore operation. It just does metadata updates, gets back to the transactional consistent point, and now the newly restored database points to the original version in Azure. So all of this is predicated on you having the right credentials to be able to do that. So it prevents people from randomly restoring stuff and messing up your pairing.
Okay. Are there any new features in Windows Server vNext that SQL 2016 will be able to take advantage of?
Do you want to take that one, Kevin?
Were there any new features in Windows Server vNext that we take advantage of?
So there's a number of interesting features. One of them is domainless clusters. So within availability groups, one of the restrictions has always been that the nodes in an availability group all have to be within the same domain. And that comes from a restriction within Windows Cluster. The Windows Cluster team put in a huge amount of work in 2016 to remove that dependency. So now you can have availability groups that span different domains with or without trust, or in fact can operate in environments where there's no domain at all. So that's a pretty huge one. And the other items are mostly in the storage realm, where we're working to automate the testing so we can formally support. So storage space is direct, which pools storage across multiple different machines. Storage replication, which replicates volumes from site to site. So think a stretched cluster, it will replicate your storage for you. And the persistent main memory, the non-volatile disk that we've been working with, are the ones that come to mind.
Yeah, the other couple of things. Now Windows Cluster support rolling upgrades. So that means you can go and upgrade the Windows version as part of the cluster without having to destroy the cluster. So very important for always on high availability. The other ones I can think of is obviously the increased support for memory and number of cores.
Okay.
One other feature is Windows Server 2016 Active Directory. They support just-in-time admin privileges. So they have privileged access management. So that should be very exciting for Windows authentication with SQL Server.
All right. One of the main features in NoSQL is sharding across multiple VMs. Is there a sharding feature in SQL Server planned?
Casey, do you want to take this one?
I can chime in on this. So right now there's nothing planned as far as release is concerned. We do have Elastic's database capabilities in Azure, and we are looking at customer feedback to see if it makes sense to bring that back on-prem, because one of the key value is to automate a lot of that stuff and be able to take advantage of compute as and when you need to. You could do the same on-prem, but there's a fair amount of work on the infrastructure side to really be able to grow and shrink as you need to. So for now, the story does exist in Azure and SQLDB. If there's strong demand for on-prem, I encourage folks to go to either Connect or User Voice and send us the feedback.
Okay. Are there significant benefits of running SQL Server 2016 on Windows 2016 versions versus running on SQL Server 2012 R2?
So there's
Windows Server.
Right, so there's access to a lot of the features that we've been discussing. So we really do believe that there's a better together story there. We think that Windows Server 2016, SQL Server 2016 make a great combined platform. We've been working really closely, the SQL team and the Windows Server team have been working really closely. We have sync meetings about monthly at the director level, and program managers are working hand in hand with whatever features that they specifically interface with. So it really has been a collaborative engagement through the release.
Okay. In StretchDB, can configuration be made to force or prevent pages from being transferred to and from Azure?
So you actually decide what data goes to Azure, and we don't really think of that in pages because you either stretch an entire table or you would stretch specific rows within the table. The stretching entire table is pretty obvious. Stretching rows, you basically provide a filter predicate to tell us which rows qualify as cold, and we will move that in the background to Azure. So you decide what goes and what doesn't. It's not a all or nothing environment. As for queries, the default behavior is if the remote table or database in Azure is not available, queries that touch any stretch-enabled table will fail. DBAs can choose to, if they want, to change the mode so that it allows queries to run successfully without the Azure portion or force it to fail. That's a DBA option that you can set at database level.
Okay, and I just put one in there, so we'll move to it and then come back. Can I stretch a temporal table?
Absolutely. So you can, the recommended scenario is to stretch the history table in Temporal, so that way you can time travel indefinitely without blowing your local SAN or NAS devices. There are samples in MSDN, and if you look at any of the Temporal presentations, there's usually one or two slides that talks about how to do this, how to stretch, and what you should do. The key thing to pay attention to there is you probably really want to stretch just specific cold rows within the temporal history table and not the entire history, because some of that stuff is probably still warm and you would query that very frequently. but after a while, I don't know, days, months, or years, depending on your environment, the data within temporal history becomes cold but still relevant, so that's what you would stretch. So typically temporally you would stretch rows as opposed to the entire table.
Okay. Seeding data for a replica using a backup / restore versus seeding, how much time do you think it would take to sync a 5 terabyte database?
So what the direct seeding, automatic seeding is doing under the covers, we're backing up the primary and restoring it on the secondary, but we're piping backup directly into restore over the replication endpoints. So in other words, the same channels we use for moving the log data from primary to secondary to keep up, we transfer the backup over that. There's no getting around transferring all the data in the primary database to the secondary. So a lot of that is going to be dependent on how fast your disk is and how fast the network channels in between primary and secondary. The nice thing about it is that you're doing the backup and the restore simultaneously, so you don't have to wait for the backup to complete on one side before you can start the restore on the other side.
Yeah, the other thing is the compression that we use now in Always On is using the fastest compression available today. We are looking into eventually getting that into backup and restore, into the backup part as well. But right now it's going to be faster doing it directly through direct seeding.
Okay, all right. Has there been any testing on SQL Server 2016 for FastTrack data warehouse?
So let me take this question. So the FastTrack program that we have done for data warehouse, it was done for 2016 after it was released, and we will do the same thing for 2016 post-release. We need to work with our partners to validate the product. So yes, it has been a very successful program, and we intend to continue that.
One thing I'd like to add, maybe do some advertisement here, is we did run the DeepCH benchmark. So DeepCH is the industry benchmark for data warehousing, and we ran it for running SQL 2016, both like working with our vendors, both in on the same hardware, comparing 2014 and 2016, and also with newer hardware. And you can find all this information on the tpc.org website, so you can see all the configurations there that they used. And we see about a 40% performance increase in 2016 versus 2014 using that. And we were already the market leader in DeepCH performance at that time.
Okay. I have heard there may be some issues with data masking in SQL Server 2016, like data not being masked in temp tables. What are some best practices for using data masking in SQL Server 2016?
I can take this one. This is Tommy, and I guess the first thing I'd want to do here is clarify a little bit of confusion that we've seen around this feature, and that's kind of around the scenario that data masking is designed for. Similarly, with another new security feature called row-level security, data masking is designed to help you simplify your application code and basically limit access to particular bits or segments of data to end users of an application. It is not designed to prevent users who have direct access to the database, your DBAs, or just users who are querying the database directly using T-SQL. It's not designed to prevent them from being able to access the data. It's really designed to help you build more secure applications more easily by having a centralized policy within the database itself. So with that said, the behavior with data masking in temp tables is basically if you, for instance, have a masked table and or a table with a masked column, and you insert or select into a temp table a bunch of those rows. If you are using a low privileged user who only can see masked data, then you will actually be copying over masked values. So you actually lose the original values when you copy them over to the temp table. If, on the other hand, you are running this select into query as a high privileged user, someone who can see the unmasked data, there's actually an unmasked permission, then the unmasked data will be copied over into the temp table as you would expect. So that's just something to clarify there. The main thing, though, is really the use case that data masking is designed to solve.
All right. What changes are there in 2016 regarding maintenance plans and their creation and execution?
I don't believe that there have been any changes in that area. One of the things you'll find about the way we approach enhancements to SQL Server going forward, in past releases, we put some effort into the entire surface area of the feature. So it kind of got peanut buttered. And as a result, a lot of those investments were fairly shallow. What we're doing now is we're targeting specific areas where we really want to make a difference. We want to move the needle. So you'll see us focusing investments in specific areas in a given release. The next release may have different focus, but that's why you may not see all areas of the product invested in a given release. It doesn't mean we're abandoning it. It doesn't mean we're walking away from it. It just means that this release, the focus is in a different area. Next release, that's what we're trying to decide right now.
I do want to add something specifically about Management Studio, because I think it's maintenance plan is part of Management Studio. So we decoupled Management Studio from major SQL Server releases, and the releases are on a monthly cadence. So every month we'll get a new version of Management Studio with new features, right? And the team is actually investing a lot in improving Management Studio, fixing some long-standing issues, looking at the connect items, looking at most upvoted stuff. I think they've made some forums as well to get feedback on priorities going forward. So if this is an important area for you, please, your voice heard. I don't recall exactly what were the forums, but I can look that up for you. What's the right way? It was on SMS items.
Okay. Yep, I've definitely heard that too, that there's monthly releases and stuff now, which would be good. Any recommendations on how to deal with migrating SSIS packages from 2012, 2014 into 2016?
We don't have anybody from the SSIS team here, so yeah, should be a question for the SDN.
It seems that you're getting rid of the BI edition. Why?
Those decisions are made not at an engineering level, but at product management level. But from my participation in some of those discussions, we're just trying to simplify the maze of different SKUs that we've had. So a lot of the features that were in BI are rolled into enterprise. We're just cutting down that massive SKUs process.
All right. Windows 2016 still has a logical core limit of 640, but it raised the memory to 12 terabytes. Have you heard that the core limit is actually being raised in Windows 2016?
I believe it's higher than that, but I can't speak definitively.
Okay. All right, well, we're waiting for some more questions to come in. For those that did not answer, what's your favorite feature in SQL Server 2016?
This is Jack Richins. I'll jump in here. So several before were mentioned that I really love, so I won't say this is my favorite, but my favorite one that hasn't been mentioned so far is all the improvements to in-memory, particularly in-memory OLTP. It's just amazing the work they did there and what that means to the database engine. It's just you're really kind of getting multiple database engines all in one package at this point with SQL Server, and you just have an incredible set of options for how you handle your data and the performance you can get from it and the scale you can get out of the same hardware relative to before.
Just one brief comment on that. Although it's true that we do effectively have multiple database engines within SQL Server, what we're working really hard on is removing the apparent distinction. So in other words, our goal is that you shouldn't know where one engine leaves off and the other one picks up. It should just be, we'll use the fastest technology for whatever you decide to do.
Exactly, and I think that's the amazing thing. Yeah, but it's pretty close to transparent. It's not like you're unloading your database from one engine and then loading it into another. It's just all there, and it just, you know, we're not quite completely transparent, but it's pretty close. And there's definitely no load and unload.
And let me add one more point to that. In fact, we are providing solutions that leverage both engines even in the same table. So one of the technologies for 2016 is a real-time operational analytics, where we are combining the in-memory OLTP engine with the in-memory analytics, and you can get the benefit of both on the same object. So just to make the same point as Kevin was mentioning, seams are broken down and it is like a same SQL engine to you, but behind the scene it is, of course, the complexity hides behind the scene. Thank you.
All right, for those of us that are wondering, do y'all in Microsoft using the Agile Scrum development methodology for SQL Server Database Engine? And if so, how large is your backlog?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on exactly how we do project management. Of course, we have various teams have backlogs that are of different sizes. Most are fairly large.
We all have lots of features we'd like to give to you, but we've only got so many hands to do the coding.
All right. Any license-related changes in 2016, and someone want to talk about what that would be and mean to the people out there?
That's a question for marketing and field, so I don't know.
Yeah, we rarely get involved too much in the licensing.
Okay. All right. Is there a team that in the SQL Server product group that helps the server vendors tune and prepare for TPC-H and TPC-E benchmark submissions?
We work very closely with the vendors that are doing TPC and TPC-H benchmarks on SQL Server. So yes, we collaborate very closely with them.
All right. And can you guys explain the how SQL Server 2016 manages to do OLAP type reporting against a OLTP data source?
Sure. I can take that, or Sunil can. What we're doing under the covers is that we're combining the two optimized stores. So for OLAP queries, the optimal store is a column store index. For OLTP, it's going to be a row store and or row store in memory. So what we're doing is enabling you to have either B-tree indexes on top of a clustered column store index, so you have fast access to individual rows that way, or you can have a row store with the whatever indexes you need for your OLTP operation, and then have a non-clustered column store index on top of that. And the non-clustered, yeah. So that way you have the fast analytics queries facilitated by the column store indexes, and you have fast OLTP access through the standard B-tree indexes, and we keep all that in sync behind the covers, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yes, Kevin. Let me add one more point, and we actually have gone into a lot more strategies how you can minimize the impact on your transactional workload while you're running your analytics, and some of those options are really pretty amazing. So I encourage you to play with the scenarios and see how it works out for you.
Yeah, to add to that, I mean, there's always this concern when you're running analytics on the same server as your OLTP. Are these BI guys running crazy queries that are going to impact my online workload, right? So we essentially have two models there to kind of isolate your workloads. One is resource governor, so you can just do specification functions to assign the OLTP workload to, let's say, 75% of your cores and the BI workload to maybe 25% of your cores. And the other option is to use always-on readable secondaries for your BI. Then all the CPU on the primary can then be used for OLTP, and you have all the CPUs and all the secondaries available for BI, for your queries. And then there's no impact on the OLTP workload of the read queries happening on the secondaries.
All right. Other than Query Store, what steps are recommended to upgrade from an older version, say 2008 R2 to 2016?
So we have, so first off, we have a tool available, the Data Migration Assistant, it's called. That's like an evolution of SQL Server Upgrade Advisor. So with that tool, what you can do is, it's a separate download, but what you can do with that tool is evaluate your database for upgrade, see if you have potential issues, or see what of the new features could be really beneficial for your database. So there's one thing that's like in the planning stage. And then for the actual upgrades, you will always want to upgrade your database before increasing the compatibility level, right? So you upgrade your database, see if everything is running well, if the performance is good and whatnot, and then you enable Query Store, and then then you have the steps that I mentioned before.
Okay. Are there any improvements into SQL replication, transactional replication?
I don't believe so in this release.
The one thing we did, we enabled publishing to an Azure SQL database. So you can use replication to keep a local database and a database in the cloud to keep them in sync, or use that as a stepping stone for migration to cloud. That is the main thing that we introduced.
Okay, can you go from cloud to on-prem?
That's not supported at this point. No.
Okay, so it's just one way on-prem to Azure then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just add one more point, which the scenario that Kevin was talking about, the real-time operational analytics. So if you have a non-cluster column stored index, we allow you to have that table as a publisher. So it was not allowed before, but now it is allowed.
Okay. What is the service pack strategy for 2016? Will there be service packs, or are there only going to be monthly cumulative updates?
Yeah, I believe the primary model is going to be cumulative updates. We will also be shipping, call them minor versions. I'm not sure what the marketing name will be, on a more frequent basis. Windows is also planning the same sort of cadence.
Okay. You mentioned using better always-on AG compression algorithm for database backups. Are there any plans to use this algorithm for old style row store data compression?
The row store data compression, in other words, page compression or row compression, is done within the page. It's not really a streaming compression algorithm as much as it is using techniques like dictionary lookup. So it's really a different class of compression.
Okay. Policy-based management, did y'all look at that, or did that not hit the roadmap for, and what is the roadmap for it in the future?
I don't think we invested in policy-based management with this release. No.
But anyway, there was a email link which was posted earlier for the tools, right? I mean, you should send feedback.
Yeah, send feedback on anything related to our tools, to SMS manageability, to Twitter handle is @SQLToolsGuy.
All right. Definitely the Twitter handle @SQLToolsGuy. He's the guy doing all of our fun SSMS work now, or leading the team there. Is Resource Governor being overlooked for other feature hints in SQL Server 2016?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer. It's not specific to Resource Governor, but so one of the new features we added in 2016 is the R language support, right? So as part of that support, we enabled resource governance for the R processes itself. So that's actually an enhancement to the existing resource governor feature, where you can now define what we call external resource pools. So you can govern CPU and memory for the processes which are running outside of SQL. In this case, the R runtime. So yeah, we do make enhancements there as needed. So.
And I mean, Resource Governor is also used in these kind of scenarios, like this operational analytics scenario that I mentioned earlier. If you want to run your BI queries against the primary server, you would use Resource Governor to separate the BI and OLTP workloads.
Okay. Are you enhancing backup and restore functionality in SQL Server 2016 or later versions? When we are backing up in large environments, do we need to depend upon the external vendor products?
Well, one of the enhancements that we made was compressed encrypted backups.
So previously, if you had a database that was encrypted with TDE compression or TDE encryption, if you try and compress the backups, nothing would happen because the encryption inherently isn't compressible. We've now enabled you to have backups that are both compressed and encrypted. So that's one enhancement we've made in the backup realm. Specific to large environments, I guess to answer that, I'd need to know whether you're talking large in terms of 20 terabyte databases, or large in terms of 1 million 5 gigabyte databases. Those are very different management problems to solve.
One thing to add is we did add functionality backup to URL, so you can back up directly to Azure Blob Storage. So you don't need to provision actual storage or the disks or the tapes to hold backups. Directly stream to the cloud. And also, if you have a scenario of your large databases and you have a lot of historical data in there, you can stretch that historical data to cloud, and then your actual database backups on-prem will be much smaller because when you restore the database, the cloud portion will just go back to like a point in time. So that is all maintained then in the cloud. It's not part of the on-prem backup.
Okay. So yeah, that should definitely help out.
Yeah. Let me just ask a follow-up question. Kevin, are there any functionality that is not out of the box from SQL Server for which a customer needs to buy a third-party tool? Any comment on that, because you're an expert on this side?
Our backup and restore tools are primarily focused on a single instance and a single database. So if customers want backup functionality which helps them organize the backups from a large pool of SQL servers, that's not something that we're currently focused on. So a lot of the backup products out there have extensive catalog databases that keep track of what databases are backed up where. That's something we're not currently invested in.
Another thing that comes to mind, one thing that should make backup restore easier is a feature called managed backup that we introduced. I think we introduced in 2014, make some enhancements or recently. So with managed backup, it's when you enable it, the idea is that SQL Server will just decide when is the appropriate time to do the full and the log backups. So you don't need to worry about creating a backup strategy and doing all this configuration. So that makes also life much easier if you are managing a large number of databases.
All right, well, I appreciate that response on there. It is time. We want to thank each one of our panelists today for their questions and their time. This is, once we said before, it is being recorded. Coming up next, make sure to stay tuned for our next session, Swimming in the Data Lake with Warner Chavez. And then we want to thank you all for attending. Follow us on Twitter at past 24 hours a hop, or share your thoughts at 24hop. And this will be recorded and you can listen to a later date. Thanks again for a great day and great presentation. Bye-bye.